Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
And the aliens with mind meld and give them the technology. They're bad aliens. So are you surprised the Nazis were influenced by demons?
No, if demons are real, I would definitely think they'd be on the side of the Nazis.
Yeah.
McDonald's is connected to the Clintons. They chop up the bodies and put them into the sausage and hamburgers. People are being cannibalized. Look it up.
And I'm watching CNN talk about this as violent white nationalist protests. We have done everything in our power to keep this peaceful, you know?
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Welcome to Yeah Nah Pasaran, a show about fascism and its gravediggers. I'm Cam Smith.
I'm Andy Fleming.
And this week we're joined by Raja from the Humanism Project. Thanks for joining us, Raja.
Thank you, Cam. Thank you, Andy.
I guess just to begin with, could you tell us a little bit about what the Humanism Project is?
The Humanism Project is what we're really about. Is about promoting diversity and inclusiveness, because that's what we're an Indian diaspora group. India has always been proud of its diverse and inclusive culture and inclusive ethos. And we found that changed in the past 10 years. And what we're trying to do is recalibrate that and get us back to our roots of who we really are, a very inclusive, a very progressive and diverse population. And a big part of that is because there's been a lot of hate and divisiveness by some elements who claim to represent the Hindu religion. They're not. They're just criminals, and they should be called as criminals and fascists. But they claim to represent the Hindu religion, and they've been causing all the confusion. And our thing is our organization seeks to call out the people who spread hate and social discord and drive this narrative that they do not in any way represent the Indian ethos or Australian multiculturalism, or the Hindu religion.
There's a lot of pushback to some of the anti-Hindutva activism. People say, oh, this is Hindu-phobia. Could you talk a little bit about this Hindu-phobia narrative and why it's not Hindu-phobic to oppose Hindutva?
Oh, look, the Hindu-phobia is a very, very interesting narrative. And it goes on, and if anything, it underlines the fascist undertones of the Hindutva movement. So just to explain that, when Hitler, during the Nazi era, what they did was it's a very specific type of hate speech construct, the Hinduphobia itself, which draws on Nazi parallels, right? And I'll explain that. So during the Nazi time, to justify the attacks on the Jewish people, the Nazis actually accused the Jewish people of planning to commit a genocide on the Germans, right? And they very often accused them of being traitors, of hating the Germans, so on and so forth. And based on that accusation, they validated the Holocaust, if that makes sense. And so that particular form of hate speech construct is called accusation in the mirror. It's a well-recognized form of hate speech construct. It was just not the Nazis who used it. The Hutus used it too, while they were orchestrating the genocide of the Tutsis. So the Hinduphobia construct is very similar. And the evidence to that is all you have to do is once someone is called Hinduphobic, it's followed by the most wild hatred. For instance, to give you some really prominent examples, Audrey Trushka is an academic at Rutgers. So when they didn't like what she said, they first, step one, labeled her Hinduphobic, and then she started getting rape threats attached to her 5-year-old daughter, right? Extremely perverse stuff. That's Audrey. And then coming on to another Hindu woman called Meena Kandaswamy was labeled a Hinduphobic. Again, rape threats and death threats attached to her children. And, you can see all of that in our Humanism Project Twitter thread. And the third one, there's a professor called Mohan Datta again a Hindu, right? He was labeled a Hindu-phobic, and he got up to 80 messages, sexually violent messages, saying that they'll cut off his parents' genitals, right? Awful stuff after he was called a Hindu-phobic. So the Hindu-phobic narrative is true, and it's used by Hindutva groups to promote hatred and justify their violence, and it draws from, Nazi hate speech.
Raja, could you tell us a little bit about this group, Vishwa Hindu Parishad?
The Vishwa Hindu Parishad is a part of a group of fascist organizations called the Sangh Parivar. The Sangh Parivar literally drew from European fascist movements, including Mussolini and Hitler. Vishwa Hindu Parishad is one of the several organizations under the Sangh Parivar. And it's got a really notorious history. Something that really, hits home very closely is Father Graham Staines, who was an Australian preacher. His wife is still there in Queensland. He and his children were burnt alive by Vishwa Hindu Parishad in India. More recently, women in India, Muslim women, are deprived of their right to education because they wear a hijab. And that, again, is driven by the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. So you have they have a very long and well-documented history of religious persecution and violence.
The reason I ask about them is, we'll get to their involvement in Australia in a second, but Hindutva recently made the headlines in the last few weeks. There were riots in Leicester in the UK. Yeah. And I noticed that a lot of the headlines were about the Hindutva riots until I went to a pro-Hindutva website where I saw the VHP were describing it as the worst terror attack against Hindus since the 7/7 bombings in London, which seemed to be over-egging the yoke a bit, but also seemed to be very divorced from reality.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So all we need to recognize is the accusation, the mirror construct, right? They use it very extensively, right? So when they're accusing someone of terrorist acts, that is to justify the terrorist acts against them. Does that make sense? You'll find that pattern over and over and over again. So they first label someone they hate or they want to promote hatred against as Hindu-phobic or committing terrorist attacks and do terrorist and attack them viciously. So it is, all of that has a very, very set pattern called the accusation, the mirror construct. So that was an accusation, the mirror construct. And you should really look that up in Wikipedia. It's quite fascinating.
Raja, Hindutva has a long history, but I'd like you to elaborate on the relationship between the movement and the Modi government, because that seems to have in some way represents Hindutva's success in India.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's like anything else, right? When government gets involved, things just get amplified. The government is such a great enabler of anything. If something is good, then the government gets involved in some good stuff. The good stuff gets amplified. Something is bad, it gets amplified. So Modi comes from an RSS background, the Sangh Parivar. And he's got a long history of a very problematic state. He was involved in the 2002 Gujarat riots, goes on to be involved, even as recently as the CANRC. He made very similar tone of many of his comments are very similar to the fascist comments. For instance, at one stage he said, you can recognize people by their clothes when he referred to Muslims, and he incited hatred against them, right? So Modi has been part of the Sangh Parivar, and that's his worldview. And he's just enabled his worldview of Hindutva by hijacking media houses and really orchestrating a very, very coordinated campaign of hate across the world. To give you an example, during the Leicester riots, someone analyzed around 200K tweets, out of which 100K of those, hate tweets or tweets aimed at social discord actually originated from India, right? Now, that's very keeping with a recent study done in Victoria by the Islamic Council of Victoria, which looked at digital hate. And they found that 52.15% of all Islamophobic hate speech from around the world came from India. they have far, surpassed the neo-Nazi groups just because of the sheer numbers. So the Modi government used the government machinery to clearly amplify it, and it's amplified through social media, amplified through mainstream, Indian TV channels, and that has caused a lot of angst in the Indian community. Friends who've been knowing each other since childhood don't see eye to eye now because of the amount of hate. I hope that answers your question. He really has amplified it using the government here.
And beyond social media, Raja, what kinds of policies is the Modi government enacting that furthers the Hindutva movement?
They've got an education and pretty much have rewritten the entire education, and some of them are some of the content. For instance, one of the things Hindutva actually derives from take pride in something called Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma is a version of Hinduism which places a lot of importance on caste hierarchies, right? And for instance, the Central Board secondary education syllabus in India actually teaches the caste hierarchy of, these guys are the higher caste, these guys are the lower caste. And I just saw that, some time ago, a few days ago, and I was flabbergasted. So it's entrenching into the education system. It's pretty much hijacked the entire media. So even during the Leicester riots, a lot of the hate narratives were driven and amplified by mainstream Indian media. Some of that Indian media is actually coming here. For instance, ABC has now, initially it used to have a partnership with NDTV. Now it has a partnership with Times Now, which, does a lot of Islamophobic hate speech. So essentially media, education, and the judiciary. The judiciary are very blind now. They're not independent. So the problem now is every pillar of democracy has been completely compromised, and hence there's so much hate speech going around, and hence the fear that we are imminently going into one of the largest genocides known to mankind. And this is not necessarily me saying that. It has the statistical analysis, risk analysis by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum places India the second most likely place in the world for a mass atrocity, i.e. a genocide to occur. So that's what Hindutva has done to India. It's compromised every pillar of democracy, undermined it. Hate speech is rampant, and we are inching towards a genocide.
Raja, could you explain the love jihad conspiracy theory and also the legislation that has been created in response to this conspiracy theory?
Yeah. So one of the things I've noticed is when fascist governments drive narratives, they're usually driven by narratives that are heavy on rhetoric and do not have any substance or evidence to substantiate them. So the love jihad is one of those things where, and these narratives usually tend to other and dehumanize the minority sections that they seek to persecute, right? So in India, a Muslim is called an Islamist or a terrorist. And now what you also do add to that is, guess what? He's not only an Islamist, he's not only a terrorist, he's a threat to your own home because he's going to cheat your daughter and marry him. He does jihad, or he attacks your family by, deceiving your daughter, marrying her, converting her to Islam. And that really is really troubling, isn't it? So families say, oh my God, these guys must be horrible. But the fact of the matter is that there is absolutely no evidence, zero evidence to support that it occurs. But it's one of those hate constructs that are used to spread fear of a certain group of people so that they become a threat, and then you can justify your atrocities against them. This is one of the many threat construction techniques that's been used in India.
Just prior to the last Australian federal election, we saw Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese both wearing VHP scarves at events put on by VHP Australia. Can you tell us what was going on there and maybe why that's a bit of a problem?
I think what it really highlights is, I think there was an article just about that time on the Diplomat, and it nicely summarized the problem. The problem is we don't know. It just highlights the lack of understanding of the inclusive ethos of Hinduism and the hate agenda of the Hindutva, and it very often is confused, right? And that's probably because what's happened is there has been this. So Indian migration is pretty recent, and we're generally good at being able to embrace migrants, and we're great at it. I think one of the things I like to say is, for instance, the Vietnamese migrants. They came in 1990. Or the 1970, 1990, and they were struggling initially, right? There was a lot of drug use and all of that. But we were able to understand their wants and needs. And today, if you come to Cabramatta here in Sydney, most Vietnamese are, professionals and doctors. It just highlights how good we are at embracing multicultural communities. But with the Indian group, I think there's been a bit of difficulty understanding who Indians are. For instance, Scott Morrison or Anthony Albanese, to them, celebrating Independence Day means going to a temple. And yet there are 300 million Muslims there, as there are Christians, as there are atheists. So their perception of Indianness is very limited, number one. Number two, even among the Hindu community, there are Dalits, caste oppressed people who are not even recognized, right? These are people who've been oppressed by the caste system for more than 2,000 years. Even that is not recognized. So what they really try to recognize is one version, one perception, or one construct of Hinduism that they think are Hindus. And even there, they go to people who don't necessarily represent Hinduism, but represent a very exclusive and political ideology that promotes hatred and divisiveness. So what is going on there is a lack of understanding of the Indian community. And what needs to be done is we need to have more conversations to highlight that Indians are a diverse, vibrant, multicultural population, and we should not try and box them, especially when you don't understand the box. If the box is one that causes hatred and divisiveness and draws from fascist ideologies, that's a box we probably now should go near. And that understanding is not there. So that's what's going on.
In terms of Indian communities in Australia, Raja, how does Hindutva manifest? Is it different to how it manifests in India or elsewhere?
So just going back to the same study by the ICB, it showed very interesting patterns, and those patterns are just as interesting as they are troubling, right? So whatever happens, so they looked at the hate speech pattern on digital hate, and they found that every time there was discord or turmoil or hate in India, the hate speech spiked here in Australia and caused the same discord. So how does it manifest? Step one, a hate campaign is orchestrated in India. It comes through WhatsApp channels, and these WhatsApp channels have Indian numbers that seed the hate from India into here. It's done through Facebook channels. It's done through Telegram channels. The hate from there, Twitter, right? The hate from there is seeded here, and then it causes hate and social discord here. And we've been saying this for a very long time, that we really need to wake up, understand the problematic nature of these guys who enable hate. And you can do a lot of things. You can hold the administrators of the Facebook responsible, so on. And so there are many things you can do. And the Leicester riots is a classic example where, more than 50% of the hate tweets actually originated in India. And so trans Hindutva from there is really exported here through WhatsApp channels. And, so we had in the past, from 2021 alone, right, we've had anti-Sikh violence in Sydney. A few months ago, there was beheading threats against a Hindu couple here because they had a mural which they were accused of, being disrespectful to the Hindu gods. It wasn't, but there were death threats, beheading threats, again, from Hindutva groups. So the same intolerance, divisiveness from India is seeding here. And very often it takes very perverse, manifestations, like, just going and threatening restaurateurs for hanging a mural in their own private workspace. So hate and divisiveness gets exported from India and into the diasporic communities, and that's a danger. And it's really, really, really important that our law enforcement authorities and Home Affairs wake up and understand what's going on.
Do you think that there's an appreciation amongst law enforcement about the presence of violent Hindutva? Because we saw, I recall the Vishal Jude case a few years ago. We had Rahul Kumar from Turbans for Australia was beaten possibly by Hindutva activists. Is there any understanding that these things are motivated by an ideology?
So there's definitely a deficit, is the answer. To compare Australia with New Zealand, just to answer your question, New Zealand already has a classification for Hindutva groups. The Combined Threat Assessment Group in New Zealand classifies Hindutva groups as Hindutva IMVE, which stands for Hindutva Identity Mediated Violent Extremists, right? Now, we don't have that classification. So we are behind New Zealand in our understanding of the Hindutva, right? And that's a problem. People say it occurs because of, our affinity, our desire to please the Indian government. And my answer to that is, do you want to allow social discord in Australia and violent extremism in Australia because you want to please a foreign government? So I think there are gaps. I'm not sure if there's a certain degree of political apathy in designating these groups. But yes, we are behind New Zealand, and that's a problem.
Roger, what are some of the dog whistles or symbols that people should be on the lookout for to recognise when Hindutva is being employed?
A big thing is accusation in the mirror, right? Hindu phobia is a huge dog whistle, because you'll find, and all you have to do is jump on the internet and find out, every time they use the word Hindu phobia, see, the definition of hate speech could be normal speech that elicits hate. So if you look at Hinduphobia, they almost consistently elicit hate, and they've been consistently used to promote hate. So Hinduphobia is a big one. The other things that are very often used are stuff like anti-Hindu. Again, you label someone as anti-Hindu, and it elicits hate. Most of the Hindutva groups don't like talking about caste. It's pretty much like caste denial, right? So you just deny it, and then you can perpetuate it. And usually they have these labels for various people. So people who are progressive are called leftist, or Muslims are called Islamists, Christians are called evangelists, in the Sikh community is called Khalistanis. Almost every single religion or Indian who does not subscribe to Hindutva thing are dehumanized and degraded as a threat. So that's a pretty good thing to look for.
Next Friday night at the Resistance Centre at Level 5, 407 Swanston Street, Melbourne, you are putting on a film screening along with Green Left Weekly of the short film The Delhi Riots Case, The Unknown Faces Behind Bars under UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Could you tell us a little bit about what the Delhi Riots case was?
Yeah, the Delhi Riots case, so there was this really, really beautiful and inspiring movement in India, and I think that's been one of the greatest movements in India, called the Shaheen Bagh movement. These were everyday women who decided to stand up to the might of the state, right? And these women congregated in Delhi saying that the CAA NRC laws deprive Muslims of their citizenship. And they said, you have to do something about it. It's not fair. We've been here for generations. You just can't decide that we're not citizens all of a sudden. And around that time, Trump had come to India. And there was a politician by the name of Kapil Mishra who gathered his troops in one of the Shaheen Bagh congregations, and he said, you need to get out now, right? You need to stop this protest now. Trump is here, and as soon as he leaves, we will do what we need to do, right? And then you had riots as soon as Trump left. And it left people, 40 people, 40 or more dead. I don't remember the numbers. It is not, most people don't like to call it a riot. They like to call it a pogrom. The reason the word program is preferred is because the state, colluded with the rioters to promote, violence against the Muslims. And this is reported in BBC. There are video footage where, police are seen throwing stones along with the rioters at Muslim localities. So it is a pogrom that followed Kapil Mishra's incitement. And people who stood up to it, or people who complained about it, were actually put in jail. Muslims were put in jail. And so these faces who decided to resist the might of the state are in jail. They're still languishing today, very often without a trial. And this movie is about that, about the brave men and women who decided to stand up to the might of the state and say, no, this is not the India we believed in. This is not the India. This is not the idea of India that we have in our minds. So it's about them.
Well, that's on 6 p.m. next Friday night at the Resistance Centre, which is at level 5, 407 Swanston Street. Raja, people can find the Humanism Project on Twitter at Humanism Project, and you can also find them on Facebook at facebook.com/Humanism Project. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Cam.
Well, that's our show. We'll catch you next week.
See you then.
असा निकले आ छड़ सारी फिकरा गांदे आए जालिम वापस जाओ 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 मिट्टी दे कण कण विचों है आंदी ऐही गूंज है जालिम वापस जाओ।
पहले भी कभी रोटियां बनाई थी ऐसे?
नहीं, ये तो मोदी सरकार ने बनवानी सिखा दी है।
सानू आकेरण स्याकाली रातां ऐही सवेर दी पुकार वापस जाओ 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 जागी अवामुन खैर मनाओ सब दी ऐही हुंकार वापस जाओ।
सुनेगा सरकार नू सुनना पड़ेगा।
बुलंद आवाज़ा कर दी ऐलाना अस्सी ठुकरांदे तुआनू वापस जाओ 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 तुआडे इन काले कातिल कानूना दाए को ही जवाब वापस जाओ।
जो किसान इधर है उनसे आकर मिलिए, उनसे पूछे कि उनको कितनी मुश्किल आती है, वो कैसे सोते हैं, कैसे खाना बनाते हैं।
असा निकले आ छड़ सारी फिकरा गांदे आए जालिम वापस जाओ 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 मिट्टी दे कण कण विचों है आंदी ऐही गूंज है जालिम वापस जाओ जालिम जाओ वापस जाओ जाओ जाओ।
Black Spark is an independent, volunteer-run bookshop, gallery, music and community space in Northcote, Naarm, dedicated to creativity, learning and liberation.
Black Spark is a space for the entire community, free of charge, hosting art, music and literary events.
To keep Black Spark free, open and accessible to everybody, we need your help.
We are calling for your support for our rent fundraiser to keep our doors open into the coming years.
With your support, we can continue to host book and exhibition launches, art auctions, fundraisers, music gigs and facilitate opportunities and growth for emerging artists and grassroots communities.
For more information, visit Keep Black Spark Alight on chuffed.com or check out Black Spark on all the socials.
Keep Black Spark alight!
A 3CR supporter.